morning, colleagues. The time is exactly 10 o'clock and we are just about to start. On behalf of the NRF-SAASTA, I would like to extend a warm welcome to distinguished guests, delegates, and participants, and a very warm welcome to our panelists, Prof. Mamza Motibe, Mr. Daniel Ndima, and Prof. Nceba Qaleni. It is such a pleasure and an honor to have you. The theme of our webinar is on the role of traditional medicine in modern healthcare system. And we have three speakers I've already mentioned. And now I'm just gonna read a brief from their bios, just as a way of an introduction to our speakers. We have Prof. Mamza Motibe, who is an associate professor and HOD in Pharmacology Division at Rose University Faculty of Pharmacy. She has more than 2 decades of experience teaching basic and clinical pharmacology, including clinical toxicology, complementary, alternative, and traditional medicine, and is passionate about pharmacology education and the decolonization of its curriculum. Her research focus is on the pharmacology and toxicology of medicinal plants, particularly those used as African traditional medicine. And she believes that traditional medicine plays a notable role in public health. Her research therefore aims to serve as evidence generation through a scientific approach that will facilitate coexistence between modern and traditional medicine based on mutual respect and not competition. She believes that the greatest achievement of research in African traditional medicine would be institutionalization of African traditional medicine, such that the 2 systems function side by side for better healthcare provision. You are welcome, Prof, and thank you for availing yourself. Then our second speaker is Professor Nceba Qaleni, who's a research professor at University of KwaZulu-Natal and Africa Health Research Institute. He is trained as a biochemist at the former University of Natal and obtained his doctorate at the University of Strathclyde in Scotland in 1996. He is a National Research Foundation rated researcher with interest on immunology, infectious and non-infectious diseases, and traditional medicine. He has served on the Interim Traditional Health Practitioners Council of South Africa, appointed by the Minister of Health. In 2007, he was appointed chair of Indigenous Healthcare System Research, a prestigious program funded by the Department of Science and Technology and administered by the National Research Foundation. Prof. Qaleni also served in various positions within UKZN, including director of the Doris Duke Medical Research Institute, Deputy Dean, and Director of the Center for Occupational and Environmental Health. Welcome, Prof. Qaleni. It is an honor to have you. And our third speaker is Mr. Daniel Ndima, who is a Chief Executive Officer at Cape Biotechnologies. He's a scientist who specializes in structural biology of infectious diseases. He is trained in protein engineering and crystallography, bioprocess engineering, and biomanufacturing. He has a bachelor and honors degrees in biotechnology from the University of Western Cape and a master's degrees in structural biology of infectious diseases from University of Pretoria. Throughout his academic journey, he has been awarded multiple awards and scholarships for his excellence in academics, social responsibility, student leadership, and entrepreneurial initiatives. He is a fellow of Allen Great Opus Foundation. This foundation provides education beyond a degree, offering 360 degrees of entrepreneurial training to ensure that fellows create value through responsible entrepreneurship, see entrepreneurship as a viable career path, are able to take an idea and develop it into available opportunities. Wow. There we have it, colleagues. We have such and accomplished researchers and entrepreneurs as our panelists for today's webinar. And at this point, I would like to also mention that we are aware that there's a load shedding schedule that might affect Prof. Mothibe and other panelists. We were very aware of that. And then if that happens, we'll make sure that another panelist will speak when Prof was supposed to be speaking. And also, I would like to highlight that we do have a chat box, so you can put your input, you can put your questions, you can put your comments there. And during the Q&A session, we will also be taking hands so that it's more of an engaging type of platform. And the theme, I would like to repeat, the theme for this webinar is on the role of traditional medicine in modern healthcare system. And we have 3 speakers, as I've already mentioned. So without the waste of time, I would like to call on our first speaker with the title of her presentation is Concurrent Use of African Traditional Medicine and Conventional Medicine, Perceptions and Realities. Over to you, Prof. Mothibe. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to come and share thoughts on this platform, and good morning to everyone. This is an important platform for all of us who are involved in traditional medicine and traditional medicine issues. So thanks for this platform. Going forth, I would just like to maybe now share my screen. Thank you very much again for the opportunity to share thoughts on the role of traditional medicine in modern healthcare or in modern health practices. I will be largely focusing my presentation, my thoughts on perceptions and realities currently on concurrent use of African traditional medicines and conventional medicine. And my focus is largely on the South African context. You know, many studies have been conducted by researchers across the wide spectrum of research areas from you know, basic sciences to botanists, biochemists, to pharmacologists, to researchers in clinical practice, to experts in public health, but those in the social sciences and humanities. Many studies have been conducted by this wide range of researchers reporting on the use of African traditional medicine by the populations and the concurrent use of African traditional medicine with conventional medicines. And the users of traditional medicines are largely patients who would be using primary healthcare services or patients who would be using hospital services. And these would be patients being treated for various conditions, chronic conditions, communicable conditions, or any other condition. And some would be using traditional medicine just for maintenance of health. You know, some would be using it not necessarily treating a specific condition, but just for maintaining good health, such as during pregnancy. And the use of traditional medicines really cuts across the board in terms of, you know, it does not matter the socioeconomic status of the patient or of the person, the education, religion, age, whether a person is rural or urban-based. All of those do not matter in terms of the choice or the use of traditional medicines. And in many studies, the reasons for the use of traditional medicines have been specified, and they are quite diverse from access to affordability to just as you know, part of cultural practices. But one important aspect that comes out of all of these studies is that the use of traditional medicine is by choice. Patients or users or clients or consumers of traditional medicines choose to do so consciously as an active component of their health-seeking behavior. So it's just a matter of us acknowledging that people do use traditional medicines as an option and not maybe enforced by circumstances. Okay, so now when we look at perceptions, the simplest way to express perceptions is it's a way in which something is regarded or is understood or interpreted. And therefore, you know, central to the use of traditional medicines as well as conventional medicines, we have the patient. And so the perception of the patient about the use of traditional medicine is important, but these other stakeholders are important. The healthcare worker as well as, or the healthcare professional, as well as the traditional health practitioner. They are the major stakeholders around the patient because both of them have the interest of the patient at heart. And therefore perceptions of these three types of these people around traditional medicines are important because these are the kind of, you know, views that influence decision-making around the use of traditional medicine in general. In many studies, we always report the number, you know, the 80% population, the number which is quoted by the WHO, that 80% of, you know, the African population use traditional medicine as part of their primary health care. And in South Africa, it's estimated that it's 72% of Black South Africans use traditional medicine. So you can see how wide or how large, you know, a role the traditional medicine play in terms of seeking help by the population. In sharing with you, I'll be sharing my part of the findings of a study we conducted in SMU in 2019 as part of a master's dissertation. And we were looking at perceptions of patients, of traditional healers, as well as healthcare workers on the concurrent use of traditional medicine as well as conventional medicines. This study was conducted in Mpumalanga, in a regional hospital in Mpumalanga, and it was an interview-based study on the patient side. We also interviewed the healthcare workers, as well as a group of traditional healers who used to hold monthly meetings at one of the clinics close to the hospital, at one of the clinics that is a feeder clinic to the hospital. So in terms of perceptions of those patients, the majority of the patients, this study was conducted at the general outpatients clinic within the hospital. So the majority of patients who attended that clinic and who were participants in the study, they indicated that they used traditional medicine, and most of them believe that traditional medicine can work together with Western medicine or conventional medicine. And some of them, of course, believe that Western medicine would work better. However, a few of them indicated, only a few of them, around 14%, indicated that they have reported the use of traditional medicine to the healthcare provider who was serving them at the time. The majority, though, of patients who indicated that they use traditional medicine stated that they did not disclose to the healer, to the conventional health provider, to the healthcare worker, their use of traditional medicine, because simply they believe that that would influence the reception, that would influence the counseling that they would receive from the healthcare provider. And some of the reasons they put forth include statements such as the patient not disclosing because the healthcare provider did not ask, or the patient did not think it was important to disclose, or there was no need to disclose. And some of them saying they were afraid to tell them, and others saying it's because they know that the healthcare provider would not listen to them. And this was really in line with the findings of many other studies that indicated that many studies have been done. And these are largely studies that would have been done before 2020, before we had the COVID pandemic. And those studies, in line with the one that we conducted, really express the same sentiments, that patients feared that by disclosing, they would lose trust. There would be a loss of trust between them and the healthcare provider. You know, there's lack of support and understanding from the healthcare provider. And some of them really said that they read the room. They could see that from the behavior of the healthcare provider that they would not get you know, a good reception, and therefore that discouraged them from disclosing. And I think these are important perceptions of views to note, because they get carried throughout many of the studies that are conducted. They come out in a lot of the studies, or they came out in many of the studies that were done before 2020. Then when it gets to healthcare providers, in the study that we conducted, the few that we had and included nurses and doctors serving within that outpatient clinic, they indicated that they would discuss concurrent use of the medicines with their patients regardless of the problem, but mainly they would be discussing harmful effects of the medicines, of the traditional medicines, and not beneficial effects. They would not recommend that patients use traditional medicines because traditional medicines are neither proven, are not proven scientifically. Or else they would discuss concurrent use with with the patients who are open about the use. So it would be discussions with patients who disclose that they use traditional medicine, or when they see that there's evidence of organ failure or damage, then that's when they would initiate discussion around concurrent use of traditional medicine and conventional medicine. And other studies performed, as I indicated, this would be studies done before 2020 also, generally also expressed negative perceptions by healthcare providers or professional healthcare providers, where there's usually a concern about the impact of traditional medicine use on treatment outcomes, and whether, you know, there wouldn't be any interactions, adverse effects, or complications, as well as toxicities of traditional medicines. However, there's also recognition that patients will continue using traditional medicines, and hence there's a need, you know, to create a conducive environment so that patients can discuss their use or their treatment strategies openly. There's also reports on, you know, the willingness to collaborate with traditional healers. However, that would be done within the context of noting that the conventional health practice has to be the one that is carrying a larger priority, that's the one that would be on top in terms of the hierarchy. And that's what came largely through most of the studies then. Then when it comes to traditional health practitioners, the ones in the study reported that, you know, they believe that traditional medicine and Western medicine can be used together. You just need to allow enough time in between, because they believe that the traditional medicine is stronger than conventional medicine, and therefore will wash out the conventional medicine and render it ineffective. They also were referring patients to clinics or hospitals. However, they were concerned about the fact that patients are criticized for consulting them first. And they were prepared to work together with healthcare providers as they realize that there are many things that they are not able to do. And therefore, because this can only be done within a primary healthcare setting or within a hospital setting, then they would recommend that patients go there. And they gave examples such as inserting a drip. It's something that they know can be done, can only be done in a proper healthcare setting. To these healers, the two types of medicines are equally effective, and one can be better than the other depending on the conditions that are treated. And they quoted mental health or mental illness as one of those conditions that they believe that a patient would rather see a traditional healer first before they get hospitalized or they get started on conventional medicine for their mental health. They also were aware that there are always negative views about traditional medicine from the conventional health providers, although these professional healthcare providers have no understanding of how traditional medicine works. And this also was in line with a lot of other studies where, you know, there's some bit of negative perception about traditional medicine as a practice from the professional healthcare providers. And there's always mistrust and disrespect that traditional healers say they have experienced. And there's also a lack of appreciation that they have seen and experienced throughout, although they were open to, you know, training in and understanding how Western or conventional medicine works, so that would help in establishing collaborative relationships, or that they would be able to have, you know, conducive relationship with professional healthcare providers. So overall, what came out from most of these studies, and that would be similar recommendations throughout, is that patients should be encouraged to disclose their use of traditional medicine, and there should always be improved communication between healthcare providers and patients, as well as traditional healers, because all of these have the interest of the patient's health. And so, you know, that can only improve the outcomes in terms of from the on to the patient. There should also be exposure or education to healthcare workers on traditional medicine use, so that they are able, and this would be done at, or this would be recommended to be done at undergraduate level, so that the healthcare workers are able to interact fairly with patients and advise them on an informed basis. And the biggest and one important recommendation coming out would be that there's a need for policy development on collaboration between traditional healers and healthcare providers, and on integration of traditional medicine into the public health system, because currently things are done as people, you know, choose. It is at the behest of the healthcare worker to decide whether they, you know, how they approach a patient who discloses that they're using traditional medicine, and how to approach a patient who they see that there's evidence of use, but then the patient does not disclose. So there are no clear guidelines, there's no policy. So yeah, most of the studies then indicated that there's a need for policies. Now, as I mentioned earlier, perceptions are simply, you know, dynamic, and they are influenced by the knowledge that we gather. They are influenced by the experiences that we go through. They are influenced by circumstances at the time. So since 2020, after we've gone through the COVID pandemic, and as we are still going through the COVID pandemic, there's been a bit of shift in terms of perceptions, particularly from the conventional health practice side. Some of the studies that have now come forth from 2020 to date do show that there's a shift in terms of thinking and in terms of how the different stakeholders now view the role of traditional medicine. A paper that has been published and by clinical pharmacologists indicate that the clinical pharmacologists indicate that they acknowledge that by virtue of having been trained on conventional drug use, that means that they will always have bias towards conventional drug use. However, they now have respect for the role that traditional medicine can play, and they are optimistic about the role or the potential role of traditional medicines in the current pandemic and in future pandemics. And another study indicated that traditional healers have a role to play and a contribution to make. Therefore, they should be allowed to perform their activities, whilst another stated that there's a need for government to show political will, and that should come out by setting up regulatory strategies for scientific evaluation and certification of traditional medicines. And this would then build confidence among healthcare workers or biomedical scientists about traditional medicines, and it would then facilitate easy collaboration and integration. For ethics committees and regulatory agencies and policymakers, there's recommendations that they should now review their bureaucratic processes and expedite current processes so that, and expedite these processes without compromising on core requirements, as they, we're looking forward to having a more clear role, a more defined role of traditional medicine in modern health. And then there's acknowledgement that dialogue and information exchange between modern and traditional medicine should be based on mutual respect. And the aim should be, for the two to be complementary and not competitive, which has been largely, the expression on coming out from the earlier studies. Okay, now, the reality is really that we are currently in. And I think this is important for us going forward, because you can have your own perceptions, but at some point we have to look at what actually is the real situation. And I have put down these as our actual realities that we're facing and that we have to acknowledge. And the first one is that health facilities will keep receiving and treating patients who use traditional medicines. And they will keep receiving and treating patients who use these medicines concurrently with conventional medicines. And that cannot be ignored any further. Currently, there are largely no policy or protocols or guidelines in place for treatment approach to patients who use traditional medicines. So then healthcare workers are put in a position where they have to use their own discretion as to how they approach the treatment for any of these patients. And I guess then it makes life easy if a patient doesn't disclose, because then you are at liberty to ignore that fact. However, if a patient discloses, then how should then the healthcare worker proceed? There's no guidelines in place to guide that kind of approach. Hence, then, with the absence of this in place, are we really providing adequate healthcare? Are we practicing appropriate disease management, or we want to believe that we are doing it? I mean, the use of traditional medicine is there. We know it exists. We know these patients exist. And it's been treated like, a white elephant in the room, in that, it's there, but you just go on with life. You ignore it in the hope that you will achieve positive outcomes anyway. Now, with all that said, then we also now need to acknowledge that our indigenous medicine or our traditional medicine is unique, and therefore we have to seek unique solutions for their safety, for their quality, and for their therapeutic uses. And the recommendations would be that all of the research that we are doing, and there's been a lot of research being done, some of it being done to validate whether these traditional medicines are really effective as they claim to be. All of this research should the research findings should translate into solutions for public health care. We've got so much information that is in different research outputs, in articles, in our libraries. We've got so much information that we have, but it's not translating to any tangible proof or any tangible use for public health. And we can simply use the WHO guidelines to help in that regard. One of the things that we could easily do is to collect data ourselves from our health facilities. I mean, how would it be difficult to make sure that every patient who comes in is just asked the question as to whether they do use traditional medicine or not. And then we note that information, we collect it ourselves. So it would be, in the archives of the Department of Health, and we would know exactly how, the percentage of our patients who actually use these services, who do use or who do report that they use traditional medicines. And with that information being available, it is up to us as researchers in the different areas, how we use that information to benefit the practice of public health. Okay, and this requires that, you know, the Department of Health, within the Directorate of Traditional Medicine, as well as maybe pharmacovigilance units, get together, get their heads together and see that this can be done or this can be facilitated. We also need to form, you know, formal links with traditional healers within the public health service. This has to be formalized because they need to be seen to be serving as an important partner within the public health sector. And it can be done by simply starting locally, as it was done by, you know, that clinic where we did our study. You know, it can be started locally. One traditional healer who is well known in a community, in the clinic that is serving a particular community, can be used as a resource, or a few of them. And this would really benefit and build on relationships going forth. It would even simplify things for the government as a whole, because then it would be easy to reach, you know, relevant stakeholders on traditional health issues. And then for policymakers, for regulators and public health experts, it is important to note that we need to have unique solutions. The role of traditional medicines in health, in modern health, and the important part they play in achieving positive health outcomes would require that we seek unique solutions. It cannot simply be expected to be imposed on the template of conventional medicine as is. And I think that if we are open to seeing how unique traditional medicine is, then we can only benefit from, you know, active participation of traditional healers, as well as active input of traditional medicine as a practice within the public health service. In my last slide, COVID-19 as a pandemic really catapulted the role of traditional medicine. It really put the role of traditional medicine on the, you know, on the central stage of modern healthcare. And there is now political will going forth. I mean, this is the first time that we've heard that WHO has recommended that, you know, traditional medicines can be taken for clinical trials, which is something that we've been battling for a long time. But now, you know, there's a move towards allowing that and facilitating that clinical trials can be conducted on traditional medicine. So I believe that we shouldn't lose that momentum. There's you know, all of the stakeholders now seem to be realizing that there's a much important role, there's a much better role that traditional medicine can play, or a much more significant role that should be attributed towards traditional medicine in modern healthcare. And with those few words, then I would like to say, Ke a leboga. Thank you very much for your attention. Thanks.
Thank you so very much, Prof. Motibe, for such an enriching presentation with practical examples. And you highlighted the use of traditional medicine as an option, not forced by circumstances, and the importance, you know, of having the interest of the patient at heart. Thank you so very much. Very enriching presentation. Okay. There are a number of questions that are directed to you. However, we'll address all the questions during the Q&A. So I would like just to communicate that we've noted the questions, and Prof. Motibe will be addressing them during the Q&A session. Thank you very much, colleagues, for those questions. Please keep them coming. And for today's webinar, our second speaker is Prof. Ngceba Qaleni, who will be giving a presentation titled Developing Solutions for South Africa's Priority Diseases Using Indigenous Knowledge System. Prof. Qaleni, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kobani, our facilitator. And I'm also grateful to the organizers of this meeting for inviting me to participate. And greetings, everyone who's attending this webinar. The title is there for you. And let me just state that we have some major pandemics in South Africa. Stats SA says as of now, there's probably about 8.5 million South Africans with living with HIV. The country has experienced more than 4 million COVID infections. It was estimated that of the 4.5 million people between 20 and 79 years old with diabetes in South Africa, in 2019, 52% were undiagnosed, kind of a silent killer that we are finding. Of course, these come with partners in crime or terrible twins like TB and HIV, which makes TB one of the leading causes of death amongst people living with HIV. And we also have a high prevalence of non-communicable diseases, for example, obesity, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease, and are also on the increase at the moment. So we do need to find solutions. Taking on cue from Professor Motibe is that COVID has taught us something. The first is that we live in a society where colonialism is entrenched, which means that we depend on the West. We don't develop drugs here, we don't develop vaccines, we always wait for Pfizer or whomever to supply, including generics. When the chips were down during COVID, the West looked after its own citizens. We're back in the queue. And also it's shown us that solutions do not lie only on big pharma, and that is important. So we do need to bring solutions to the table for scientific investigation, such that we can also rely on ourselves, and that is important. Now, President Mandela had said that traditional health practitioners often have greater accessibility and acceptability than the modern health sector, and should be used as a vehicle for health promotion. The word use is not about abuse, but it's like they're good partners in this endeavor. Now, literature has been said that THP constitute an extensive network potentially capable of expanding and simplifying access to comprehensive HIV/AIDS, STIs, and TB prevention care and treatment. And of course, patients move freely between these two systems, traditional and allopathic. We had, since 2007, been involved in an intervention to bring traditional healers and the public healthcare system closer around this program. We've worked with about 2,000 traditional health practitioners in 5 districts in eThekwini, in KZN, and linking THPs with the local clinics for referral amongst themselves as THPs, where they can refer suspects for testing and counseling, screening for TB, and also then link that, because of the AIDS system that we have in South Africa, link them to the ward AIDS committees for reporting. This goes then to local AIDS councils and reporting up, such that the data they're generating feeds into the statistics of the country. However, this has had its own challenges because the healthcare system tends to, it's kind of a one-way referral. Healers refer and the healthcare system thinks it's taken over. That's kind of changing slightly for now. But we're also realizing, because traditional healers feel then we're only making them lose their own patients to the healthcare system. But they do have therapeutics. Why are we not looking at them? And which is now the focus of this presentation for now. But this requires a kind of a paradigm shift, because we're not starting drug development from scratch in the conventional way. We're starting with a product that healers are already using, prescribing to their patients. And they already know that it's working. because if it's not working, they'll probably refer to another healer or, of course, the public health system. Indians call this reverse pharmacology. You're starting with a product, not the conventional drug development way, but normally a healer may not explain the mechanism of action if the product works. How does it work? And so we do different work to establish that, and also identifying the active pharmaceutical ingredients. Not that we're looking for pharmaceuticals, but at least we can explain in this product, these are the chemical entities that consent to effect certain healing properties. I will just select a few cases for the sake of time. This is a product, a 4-plant product from a healer we work with here from Dundee, Babangabinde. And we've been able to kind of establish in these 4 plants which plants have potential anti-HIV properties. And you can see that using effervescence as a positive control, that the extract, the crude extract of this plant has potent antiviral. Remember, effervescence is a single pure compound. And this crude extract still has activity at a concentration similar to effervescence, which we think were we to further purify it, it probably would be much more potent. And we are also working with phytochemists who kind of are pulling out these compounds to identify them. We've also looked at a subtype C virus activity for this product, and we're using positive control of AZT, and we can see that it is also quite effective. Now, one of the things we know with antiretrovirals is that they're not a cure for HIV. Rather, they clear the virus in the blood to non-detectable levels, while the virus hides latently in tissue. If a patient stops taking their treatment, the virus might reappear, actually might even be more resistant to the antiretrovirals. So we were looking at, because we're not looking at generating a new antiretroviral from a traditional medicine, but we're looking at what are the functions that the product have, because there's a myriad of chemicals that are within the mixture. Do they reverse potentially latent HIV virus in tissue? And this is the model that we're using, and what it shows us quite clearly is that yes, it does reverse, and in a concentration related way. So now we know we have a product that can achieve both functions. And the plan now is to take this forward and such that we can, in a manner, move to phase 1, phase 2 clinical trials. We've already done some animal work on this. When the advent of COVID, the Department of Science and Technology implored us to look at our local indigenous herbs that are well known to manage flu and other things. And so a few of us, CSR, University of Free State, and probably others have embarked on this work. We're part of a consortium, so we share this work. And so we would take, this is one example that we work with, and we then work with these plants that are coming. Some come as single or combinations, and we've got an assay that we've established for anti-SARS-CoV activity. We know, for example, that the virus enters the human cells through a spike protein, H2. And so we've got also an assay that we can see whether the products can, block the virus from entering through the H2 system. This is part of the products that we look at. And what we can see that this does actually, with a selective index of about 116%. So at least we do know that some of these traditional medicine can be very effective in preventing the entry of the virus into the human host. But there's more to COV than just entry. You've got to know if you're killing the virus, and also are you preventing the cytokine storm and other conditions. So it's because this is more like a syndrome. But we've got promising data, which then allows us to move to the next stages. We're using here an antibody. We can also, as a positive control, we can also see that we can achieve for some of these products relative activity to that of an antibody, which is much more specific. And so this gives us hope on that we can then move to the next steps. Now remember, SARS-CoV in a sense has our concern is a sense of where there are no treatment options. There's some people clear the virus on their own. Some people need 10 days to clear it with steaming at home and whatnot. But there's nothing that for those with severe symptoms can rely on. And if it gets the virus get to the lungs, what do you do? And so these are the things we're looking at this stage. Of course, I mentioned diabetes as a pandemic that is upon us, and with hypertension as its twin, and other cardiovascular conditions. And so we have models for type 1 and type 2 diabetes. The data I'm showing you here is that of type 1. And you can see on the bottom graphs, we use conventional drugs as positive controls, insulin, metformin, glibenclamide, and that you can see that the product, the extracts that we're working with are working comparatively. These are a mouse model, and we do also have a model for OB, the obesity, which is the current type 2 diabetes. We also have similar data that we're generating. So this allows us then to at least move forward with data. I get some of these rare referrals that come to me, one for cervical, one for prostate, and this one is for Kaposi sarcoma, which in the past was kind of an AIDS-defining cancer. There's a patient who was being seen by a GP who's on medical aid, is refusing treatment from a doctor, but is not taking it. He goes to his healer who gives prescription for him. And so when he goes back to his doctor, the response is not how the doctor was expecting, and then begin to ask him. As Professor Motiba was saying, some doctors do ask and say, what are you on? And he says, I'm not taking your product, I'm taking my healer's one. And so the doctor refers this medicine, not the patient, but the medicine to us to say, I don't do research. Can you work on this? We do not have a model for Kaposi on our system, but we have collaborators in Florida who had published work on this. And so we referred a PhD student to Florida to do some work. Now, what happens with the virus? Once it infects the cell, it injects its DNA on the host DNA. The cell is transformed into cancerous, and of course, the tumor grows, multiplies. So if you treat the tumor, you're not actually treating the causative agent. You're rather eliminating, and which might relapse. What this medicine is doing is that it's not only lysing the cells, but you can see that the genome is being released, is being spewed out. This is a microscopic observation. But if you measure what is coming out, what genome is this, it's clear that this is a viral genome if you use PCR to test, which are much more specific in a dose response manner. So it means you don't need higher doses of the product to achieve this. Now, at least we know that with a combination of this traditional medicine, you're killing the tumor, but you're also exposing the virus. You can now zap it with antiretrovirals and clear, which is kind of a concept of cure. And so this now opens up a line of products that are ready for clinical research, for clinical trials, and education. I say this because we do not have traditional medicine hospitals in South Africa, so a lot of the clinical trial work will have to perform in conventional hospitals, which are led by doctors and nurses and pharmacists, which is positive for us because then it creates an atmosphere for respectful and collaboration with health practitioners, because we don't hand these products. The healers are part of the research process. They don't stay outside as we do all of this work, because they have an insight and a vested interest into this work. They know better these products. It also contributes to interprofessional education. And of course, it has potential to contribute to the growing of the economy, because once you do clinical trials, you need to move to sustainable agriculture. So you can't harvest in the wild. We need to grow these plants such that when you commercialize, you don't commercialize things from the wild, but that's that. So in KwaZulu-Natal, we've been asking our government to spare us about 11,000 hectares of land for agriculture, such that we can probably create just in agriculture 22,000 jobs. And of course, there's other logistics that flow with that. Just to acknowledge, we work with a range of stakeholders. On my left is Babu Kumalo and Babu Cele Zihlahla. These old men have passed on, but the work still goes on. We're in touch with their families. We've got various labs that we work with on virology, immunology, chemistry, and a range of things. We also acknowledge Babu Nkabinde here on the right, with his son wearing a green top, and other colleagues who came from Canada and the States. We acknowledge the various funders that fund this work in various stages. And of course, the colleagues from Florida. You may not see Nonhlanhla, she's got a very dark skin and she's not smiling, so you can't even see her teeth, from Umlazi here in Durban. She was doing the work on Kaposi. And but we have a team of young, vibrant scientists who are doing all this work. I just write grants and reports. They've got their brains around themselves. The majority are girls, and they're doing very well. And I just want to say thank you for this opportunity once more.
Thank you so very much, Professor Kani, for sharing from your wealth of knowledge, experience, and expertise. And you mentioned the importance of bringing solutions, self-reliance, and not only depend on big pharma, and with the product from the end, so more of a reverse pharmacology. Thank you so very much. I've noted the questions, but we'll also attend during the Q&A session. Thank you, Prof. At this point, I also have to share that we've consulted with Prof. Kaleni a number of times from VUT, because we're also trying to navigate our way in this space. And it's time he has opened his door and welcomed us. Thank you very much, Prof. Kaleni. And our last speaker, our third speaker for today, yes, time has run fast, is Mr. Daniel Ndima, and he will be giving a presentation titled Leveraging Fourth Industrial Revolution tools to leapfrog IKS advancements. Over to you, Daniel.
Program Director, thank you, Prof, for the opportunity. Thank you to SAASTA for invitation. Thank you to my fellow panelists. They are senior to me, and they are people that I also look up to in terms of what they are able to achieve in their respective fields. Let me also thank the audience, people that are tuning in into this seminar. Mine is going to be quite a short one, and I think I'm given a platform after such brilliant presentations, and I was noting down quite a lot of things. But mine is just to do the presentation on some of the work that we do, some of the proposed frameworks in enhancing the indigenous knowledge system research and development activities. So it's going to be a hybrid of the work that we do and the work that we think can be done to enhance the research and the outputs. So in terms of the company that I work for, is a South African biotech company. We have proprietary biomanufacturing process for manufacturing biomolecules, proteins, enzymes. We have also a second platform, which is the convergence of bioinformatics and artificial intelligence. And I think the presentation will be expanding on this platform. And our value chains on bioprospecting of our indigenous biodiversity hotspots in search of these novel biological molecules that are used both in diagnostics and in therapeutics. So we do development, manufacturing, and distribution of products henceforth. This is some of the management team that I work with across different departments. So let me start. In essence, what Prof. Mutibe and Prof. Galeni presented was the workflow, in terms of science aspect of the IKS and how we process this knowledge and translate it into products that are able to provide healthcare to the people. So this is the current workflow, which is normally done in a laboratory space where you get a plant, you are able to extract the material, and then you have these compounds that are extracted and purified using different methods. Then you characterize them, obviously using some machinery. Then you are able to do pharmacological activities in, sort of looking into different diseases. So this is the sort of a straightforward kind of work that has to be that has to be done in as far as getting the plant material or a shrub and processing it and being able to assess. So what we sort of looking into is actual genomic data of these species. And what we are doing also, even though we don't do actual plants, we do environmental genomics, which can also be copied into the same framework, because the same framework works across different genomic data sets. So we do sequencing of the material that we harvest, and then we are able to then get the genomic data and store that data on our high servers, the high performing computers. And you can also do extraction of the material, looking for certain proteins or looking for those compounds that Prof spoke about. But what we do as a company is the leverage of the machine learning, deep learning algorithms to assess the genomic data and profiling, including the genome that codes for specific proteins that are active ingredients within the formulations, or the genome that codes for such particular biologics, so that we leapfrog and we accelerate the process of actually identifying and modernizing the research around this space. So we are able to then be able to provide prediction models that are able to tell us which targets, or which diseases can this particular target, this particular, sample be able to target. So we are able to also assess the secondary metabolites from the synthetic gene clusters that are coming from this kind of samples. So our kind of research looks into leveraging on AI to ensure that we fast track the research process, to ensure that as and when we do extractions, etc., in these value chains, we do that with speed and precision, because the genomic data, which is scientifically backed, will give us an idea, of how we can leapfrog and leverage the fourth industrial revolution tools. In terms of what we have done as a company, we have done the convergence of AI and bioinformatics, where we are able to get this genomic data loaded onto our server, and we are able to do bioinformatics processing and machine learning processing. In that regard, we are able to map different species or different environmental samples, and they are able to be characterized properly, so that when we get into the laboratory in terms of development, we are able to fast track that process with precision. However, there are other technologies that are being used in terms of being able to bioprospect and to get as many as diverse of material as possible using digital tools. I think we have seen Tron that are now being used. I think it is high time that we modernize the way in which we even harvest. I know that at times it's a very spiritual process, but I think in terms of environmental sampling, we can leapfrog some of these technologies. So what is the global overview? Plant-derived drugs as a segment, we're looking at nearly $30 billion around 2017. And this year alone is close to $40 billion with an annual growth rate of about 5.9%. And we know very well that, most of these, plant species that are used in traditional medicine are actually extracts in certain modern medicine. So these drugs, you can think about some of the drugs that we consume, which especially medicine for flu, most of them are actually made up of extracts. So this market covers that space. But we also have other species that are extracted, from different parts of the world that are co-formulated in different plant species. In terms of the digital plan, we're looking at, how scientists and traditional knowledge holders work together to create value and synergies, but more importantly, using science as a backup or as a foundation to ensure that we meet compliance for regulatory processes, so that we don't view traditional medicine as a complementary medicine, but as a mainstream medicine for the people that prefer to use. So I don't see a difference personally between indigenous knowledge and modern medicine, because traditionally we used to cure very sophisticated diseases, and I think now is time for us to find that symbiotic relations between traditional medicine and modern science, so that we can go about doing precision medicine. We know that, especially as Africans, that we have a symbiotic relationship with our environment. Our environment is our healer, because it provides us with food and medicine and the environment, including the air that we breathe. So we need to find ways in which we can search for diseases within our genomes, mapping them back into this database that I'm talking about that uses AI, so that we're able to understand this old and ancient symbiotic relationship, how it translates to the modern healthcare. But we also need to make sure that we protect the IP that is developed by the indigenous knowledge holders, so that we can store it for future generation. So this proposed model of basically being able to store the genomic data of these indigenous species is important because it's the information that will be stored and be used for generations to come. Because when you store something in a form of data, you basically store the actual makeup of such material that you're storing, so that as science evolves, we are able to remake and remodel those kind of species for future use. I will end there, Program Director. These are some of our partners, stakeholders, investors, and research and development collaborators. The research that we do around AI and machine learning, which is the convergence of bioinformatics and deep learning, etc., is funded by TIA with the support of Department of Science Innovation. And this platform has been regarded as a national competency, and we would like to open it up to researchers in this space so that they're able to leapfrog their research and get other exciting, findings from the research that they do from some of the species that they are working with. I thank you, Program Director.
Thank you so very much, Daniel, for sharing what you do. And you highlighted the importance of the collaborative effort between traditional medicine and modern science, with an intent of creating value and synergy. And when I was looking also at your discovery workflow, how innovative is your technology, especially when you're talking about genomic data, and we know, how the genomic sequence played a pivotal role, when COVID-19 emerged. Thank you so very much for that informative presentation. Colleagues, at this point, I would like to thank all our presenters. It's been very informative, it's been thought-provoking, it's been enriching. And now we are moving to the Q&A session. And I think the best way to tackle this session is to take the question as they come. So we will start with the first question, and I will give the questions, 2 questions first, the first round in terms of answers to our panelists, 2 questions each. And then if we still have more time, we'll take further questions. We also wanted to take a hand if time will allow us, but for this session, we have up until 11:40. So the first question, can I direct it to Daniel, is a traditional medicine could become, I think a traditional medicine counted over allopathy? That's the first question for Daniel. Can you note that? And the second question, Prof. Mamza, can you please ask, it's Dr. Mobati Vincent Chakala. Can you please ask Prof. Mamza to provide the study title, and if it is possible to access the study from the university repository? That is for you, Prof. And the first question for Prof. Galeni is, on the 72% of Black South African, what is your finding on the white South African on the use of traditional medicine? I'm not sure, Prof, if you have an answer for that, but that is the first question for you. And then the second question for Prof. Motibe is from Dr. Bongani Ngala. Prof. Motibe, is Dr. Ngala here, who has interest in ATM? You mentioned that patients were reluctant in sharing with their GP if they use ATM. I'm wondering, how far are we as a nation to have an open mind and accept the alternative treatment as is done in other countries such as China? Prof. Motibe, that is your second question. And Prof. Galeni, your second question is there any current effort by the government or research sector to develop a database or instrument similar to the SAMF, South African Medicines Formulary, aimed at doctors, pharmacists, nurses, dentists, and other concerned with safe and cost-effective ATM prescribing? Given the wealth of research already conducted on commonly used ATM to treat both acute and chronic illness, and that is from Spamandla Gambule. And the second question to Daniel, I'm not sure whether it's a specific question, but I'll give it to Daniel. I'm not sure whether it's directed to a specific panelist. Were they conducted in areas where you are almost guaranteed that people in that location are using traditional medicine? I think let's share this one for Prof, because the practical evidence was from Prof Motibe and Prof Galen in terms of the studies that were done. I think that question is directly, I'll give it to all the panelists if you can also tackle that. And the second question for Daniel, traditional medicine links the physical to the spiritual. How will then do clinical tests on spiritual issues? I hope, colleagues, you've got that. And now I'll hand over to you. I hope you've noted which one is your question. Thank you so very much. I'll hand over to Daniel. You can start.
Yeah, thanks, Prof, for the opportunity. Thanks to our colleagues who attended the session for the questions. The first question around traditional medicine versus allopathy. I think we have to be honest to say that, maybe it is my opinion that there is no traditional medicine and there is no Western medicine. Medicine is medicine, it is universal. What matters is, whether it works, to cure a particular disease or not. I think when we refer to Western medicine, we talk about Western inventions of how medicine is made, packaged, and distributed, or even administered to the patients, which is part of the industrialization processes that they went through and modernization that they went through. However, that does not mean that some of the traditional medicines that we have cannot be administered similarly to the Western medication. So I don't see Western medication as above traditional medicine or the so-called traditional medicine or vice versa. I see both as functionally important for our healthcare. I hope that answers your question. I want to touch base on another question that was raised, around the traditional medicine links, to physical nature and the spiritual nature. You can't really do clinical trials on a spiritual, activities that one has to go through, the person that follows traditional routes in terms of healing. But I do believe that, in terms of medication that is administered, thereafter, it is a medication that can still go through the process of evaluation, scientific evaluation, to understand the compounds that exist within such medication, or go as far as understanding the genomic data of such species and storing it actually for future generations, in terms of being able to redevelop such a particular plant. I think we have seen that through global warming, drought, and many other global challenges, that we are running out of our forests, we are running out of our biodiversity hotspots. We are trying by all means to salvage them. If our traditional healers are unable to find some of the old shrubs or old plants that they used to find initially, it will be important for us to store so that the data can still be used in our own version of modern medicine. Thank you, Program Director.
Thank you, Mr. Ndima. And Prof. Motibe? Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chairperson, really. I think the question at first was whether I could provide the actual title of the study that we did and whether they can access it from the university repository. Yes, the answer is yes to both questions. I think if you just search, I'm not sure, I can send, The title really of the study, let me just say it even before I type it. It's, as I said, it was for a master's project. It's concurrent use of traditional medicine and Western medicine, perceptions of traditional healers, health professionals, and patients at the regional hospital in Limpopo province. And it was conducted by Vincent Mokoka, who's a qualified pharmacist and actually works at that hospital, that regional hospital. I think in my presentation, I said it was in Mpumalanga, but it's actually in Limpopo province. It's just that historically, I knew that area to be under Mpumalanga, but now with new borders, it's Limpopo. So yeah, that dissertation can be, we are in the process of writing out an article for publication, but the study can be accessed through the university repository. And the next question, I don't remember what the question was, but there was a question relating to the study, and I think that is referring to what I presented. The question is whether the study was conducted in an area where we knew the people would be using traditional medicine or something to that. I'm not sure how it's phrased, but it seems to be asking that. But my answer to that question would be, where in South Africa do you think you would find people who do not use traditional medicine, if I can put it that way? If you get into an area and you want to do a study on traditional medicine, are there areas that you know for a fact that people do not use traditional medicine and therefore you wouldn't go there? I'm not sure about that. But what I know is from just reading previous studies, from just doing literature survey, it tells us that a large part of the population in South Africa use traditional medicine, and that has been referenced. There's a reference that we have used that quotes 72% of Black South Africans, and I wouldn't know about white South Africans and their, the prevalence of traditional medicine use, but that is what we do. My answer would be that you just pick a convenient area for you to do a study. It might be an area where you come from, it might be an area close to where you work, it might be any area of interest, but that study would be legitimate. Yeah, I think those are the two questions you referred to first.
Yes, Prof. The last part was about the reluctance of patients sharing with their GP. And the participant is asking if he's actually wondering how far are we as a nation to have an open mind and accept the alternative treatment as it is done in other countries, such as China. I think he was requesting for your comment on that.
I truly believe that, COVID, in how it came upon us as a pandemic and how, we scrambled around in trying to find solutions to how to address or manage the pandemic. It really propelled the role of traditional medicine onto the center stage. And I think we all know the history behind that. So with that, I believe that there's now, willingness for people now to be open-minded about seeing the role that traditional medicine can play. And if we continue having these conversations, open conversations about the role that traditional medicine plays in health, in carrying part of the health burden in our society, it would help in going forth. It's really about the fact that people have to accept that there is the use of traditional medicine. That is the one thing. It doesn't help for us to keep questioning whether that is true or false, because it's a reality. It is being used, and the patients who go to the clinics would also have been people who use these medicines. So that compels anyone who is a healthcare provider and who services patients to be aware of this and acknowledge that we cannot keep chastising patients or criticizing them. The best you could do is advise them from an informed basis. If you know what traditional medicine is, what it's used for, how it's used, you'd be able to advise patients accordingly, instead of us always wanting to revert to saying, do not use. And in that way, if we are open-minded about it as healthcare, the conversation should keep going. The other thing is there are people, there are healthcare providers who are open-minded already, who really do have, a view that traditional medicines should be put in the rightful space beside conventional medicine. But because there are no proper guidelines in place, it puts these kind of healthcare workers in a psychological dissonance, if I might say, ethical dilemma, because now they would be advising patients out of their own discretion, which then might be clashing with their profession or with the ethical code they are operating in. And such kind of advice is usually done on an informal basis. And therefore, when we do studies on perception, these healthcare workers would never tell that they do advise patients to do that, because they have that kind of dissonance, they have that kind of conflict within themselves regarding the clash with their profession or with their, their work. I believe that we should just keep these conversations open and going, and it will help. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. And Prof. Galeni?
Thank you, Program Director. I think let me start by dissing this myth of West. As you know, we give the West a lot of credit when they are bioparades. There's a lot of pharmaceutical drugs in the market that come from African traditional medicine without acknowledgement for. We can name a few products that are in the market at the moment. They're not Western per se. It's our knowledge stolen and commercialized elsewhere and packaged back to us. So, and secondly, the concept that medicine is not African is strange, because medicine originates from Egypt. The first medical schools were in Egypt, not in Greece, not in Europe. And so I want to distance myself from this concept that modern medicine is Western, as if Africa has never created nothing. It's false. That's the first cesarean section was performed in Uganda by the Baganda women before Europeans came to Africa. And so I don't want to take this concept that modern medicine is Western. It is modern medicine. I think or conventional medicine. Let's leave it there. The second matter I just want to state was this question of whites and traditional medicine. When I teach my students, medical students, and I walk in a class and then I talk to them about traditional medicine, I ask them, who amongst you is taking traditional medicine? A few hands would come up. Then I ask them, who, when you have flu or cold, would take garlic, ginger, and all these things? And the class would raise their hands, and I ask, what evidence do you have that, because these are home remedies, they're traditional things. You just got it from your mother to your grandmother. And so there's also this conception of traditional medicine has only to do with a traditional healer only. No. This is knowledge that is embedded in societies and that we access. When the era of COVID, and there was this issue of Artemisia annua from Madagascar, all the shops were cleared of anything that had Artemisia. All the pharmacies were cleared. Do you think they were only cleared by Black people? No, all races. Everyone wanted to survive. And so there's that conception. But I guess because we are lastly studying African traditional medicine, which has its own distinct features, and because we do want to uplift those who have been previously oppressed and sidelined, we are focusing on them to valorize their knowledge, to valorize their work. there's no point for me in studying a herb from England when there are many herbs or South Africa that needs to be to do a lot of work on. So that's the context I will start to preface my answer. The second part has to do with the database. The challenge with the database is that our regulatory processes at the moment are incomplete. So SAPRA does not have a system to register African traditional medicines at the moment. So you don't have a product that is registered at the moment and classified as an African traditional medicines. That has been gone through the rigor of science and clinical trials. And secondly, is that even the Council for Traditional Health Practitioners is not yet in place to register and recognize the practitioners of traditional medicine. So, and so that's what becomes a trick, because you know, we are looking at really as getting essential traditional medicines on a list. And so that's what other countries like Ghana have gone ahead. They got to have a list of essential traditional medicines that you find in their hospitals for treating patients. So we're still backward in South Africa in that regard. I can't remember what was it about clinical trials that I need to answer, but or I don't know whether it's linked with spirituality or not. I can't remember the question now. But the context is that if we do want to put these products, the traditional healers, I'll probably use this is Zulu here, not I don't know how it is other languages. Where a healer says, I have my bag of tricks, I use it on my patients. But in the context of these pandemics like HIV, COVID and other things, I have something that I think I can put it available, make it available for development such that it's widely available to help the nation, to help the nations. And so the only way to take this forward is, and that you can then make sure that they're available widely, is the route at the moment globally is that you go through these processes of clinical trials and things like that. And that is important. It don't take away anything from what the healer does with their patient in their space. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Prof. Kolani, Mr. Daniel, and Prof. Motibe. For this session, we will take one question for each panelist. I hope we'll be able to answer all the questions, but if time doesn't allow us to do that, we can always write, the panelists can address the question even after the webinar. Okay, this question is directed
I was seeing some hands, Chair, if you, I don't know, we'll take them at the end. There was
maybe we can take one or two for now. I'm not seeing any hand on my side.
Okay.
Prof. Kolani, since you can see the hand, can you? Oh, Abraham Nguni. Yes, I can see that hand. Abraham Nguni, you can go ahead. Thank you, Prof, for that.
Good day, colleagues. Thank you, Program Director, for the opportunity. And thank you again for the invitation to this informative session. I have only one question, which is very critical, especially to the sector, as the African traditional medicine sector. It talks about collaboration beyond research for the indigenous knowledge holders. At this point, we'll be talking about traditional health practitioners themselves, because they are the knowledge holders in terms of African traditional medicines. Are there any provisions of development in training for the traditional practitioners who are already in the space of commercialization of traditional medicine, so that they may be well capacitated in terms of how far are we in terms of research, how far are we in terms of the product development for African traditional medicine? I just know of a program in the UKZN, which is the prior learning on traditional medicine and practices that is led by Professor Kaleni. Are there any other of these trainings that are provisioned to be capacitating traditional practitioners? Because I'm very much interested, as I've recently joined the space of the development of African traditional medicine to make products and to professionalize the use of traditional medicine to our consumers. Thokoza.
Yes, Prof.
Can
Go ahead.
I respond? Yeah.
Yes, please.
There's quite a number of initiatives, Babungoni. Firstly, EVUT, where our facilitator is. They do have a project funded by IDC around these aspects. So they're working lastly with the communities in the Vaal around where the university is. I know the Innovation Hub in Gauteng has been also training on entrepreneurship. I know there's a few healers from KZN who have benefited from that program. And which is really looking at entrepreneurship. We have just been funded by CEDA to work on two aspects of, again, entrepreneurship and commercialization. One is around the agriculture, because we can't push commercialization from the wild. There needs to be a program around entrepreneurship and growing these crops, farming, and then, because that's then sustainable. And then we'll also be looking at how we train healers around entrepreneurship, the business of selling medicines, but within the kind of compliance and regulatory space that they need to comply with. And so ours is new. It has not even been launched, the one by CEDA. We're still working on the business plan and all of those things before it can be launched. But the Innovation Hub has already been in existence for a while. They're funded by the Department of Science and Innovation. I think the University of Free State are equally going to be coming in. They're funded by TIA to support these kinds of initiatives in the different spaces. So yeah, there are initiatives that are coming on board, the IDC, TIA, and the range of funders in this place. It's just that it's a new concept, so it's rolling out slowly. I'm sure Dr. Tozama can also comment on the VUT experience.
Thank you, Prof. Galeni. You're very correct. It's a new concept and it's a complex space on its own. However, when we started at VUT, we started a simple biomedical procedures short learning program, and with an intent of training traditional health practitioners that are in the Vaal. So when we started in our database that time, we had about 400 THPs. And thus far, we've managed to train 100. So we have not completed the whole Vaal or Setibeg, if I can be more specific. That is the simple biomedical procedure. So the facilitators themselves were traditional healers or traditional health practitioners that were trained prior, and then they were facilitating the program. And one was a staff member that we're working with, who was a scientist and also a traditional health practitioner. And we work closely with the executive of the traditional health practitioners that are in the Vaal. But the space also, as I said, it's a very complex type of space, but there's a work that is happening at VUT. Thank you. I'm not sure if Prof. Motibe, you'd like to add, or Daniel, you'd like to comment.
No, from my side, I have nothing to add. I'm actually just aware of the activities in UKZN with Prof. Galeni and the University of the Free State with Prof. Mazabisa. So, yeah. On that
Thank you,
note.
Prof. Daniel, on your side, do you have anything that you'd like to add?
No, I'm not going to add anything, Program Director. I agree with both profs that, and I see that there's still a lot of work to be done. I just want to emphasize something. I think Prof also mentioned it, that, Africans were already, developing medicine pre-colonial era. And what I want to share is that the current medicine that we have, some of the drugs that we consume are made up of proteins, and those proteins are coded by the genomic sequences. Those genomic sequences, if you go to some of the databases, you realize that they actually come from the plant species or plant shrubs or some of the herbs that are found around the world. So there's the contrast between how we apply medicine. It may be different, but the purpose or the objective is still the same. So what I'm saying is that, you know, as and when we expand on the repertoire of research, we need to ensure that we don't only preserve the knowledge, but we also preserve the only material that can never be erased, which is the genomic data. Thank you, Program Director.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Ndima. I'm very aware that there's a hand. There was a hand, but I can't see it now. It just disappeared on my Nwabisa. Yes, it was Nwabisa Mayeng. You can go ahead.
Hello.
Oh, okay, you can go ahead. Great.
I'm a medicinal chemist and a traditional doctor. I facilitate the establishment of the Directorate Traditional Medicine, and Professor Neba knows me. The problem that is existing in South Africa, we don't have a policy on African traditional medicine. And I had to write a book because my daughter, who was supposed to be a traditional doctor, asked me to write it. And it's called A Model on African Traditional Medicine. It deals with issues of spirituality. It deals with the congregations of traditional health practitioners. It deals with tangible and non-tangible issues. It deals with traditional medicine as a discipline in South Africa, which is made of knowledge system of all the ethnic groups. There is even a cycle there. Now, I am saying this, it's not a question, but maybe Professor Neba will be able to explain. When will there be a policy on African traditional medicine? Because I left the department, the issue was not addressed. And the model came about because in Japan, we've got the Kempo system. We've got the Ayurvedic system. We've got the Native American system. I used to represent the Department of Health at all these WHO traditional medicine things. I have also, because of nothing has happened, I cannot even disclose the recipe that I have when people react to the COVID jab. And the other worrisome emerging health condition is monkeypox. Is Professor Galeni with his colleagues doing something so that when it comes to South Africa, we are well prepared? Thank you. I am Isaac Bani Mayeng, a cultural doctor and a medicinal chemist. I've done research in South Africa, abroad, on issues of medicine. I went there on a scholarship of pharmacy, but I changed to medicinal chemistry because we cultural doctors, we deal with products and medicines that falls in a particular schedule. And I understand pharmacists are there to deal with medicine, but they are not in the same categories like traditional health practitioners. Thank you.
Wow, great to hear from you, Dr. Mayeng. Long time. And thanks for your contribution. even that we have the THP Act in place and the draft traditional medicine policy. And unfortunately, I must say that the problem is, since then, our ruling party has been caught up in its own factional battles. And so the minister who succeeded Dr. Mantu Chabalala has had no interest in this. And currently, the current administration are equally in that space. So these are things that hamper the development and progression of traditional medicine in South Africa. As I was counting Ghana, they've moved. We are still way behind because of lack of political will. And that's the challenge that faces us. These things make sense, but I think if those who are in authority are mindful of other issues and caught up in PPE scandals and many other things, it just hampers these developments, I must just say, as it is. But it's good to hear from you. We are still continuing the work. We've never stopped. Actually, you brought Mr. Ngabinde to me, who's some of the data I'm sharing here today, and we are still progressing with that work. And lastly, on the monkeypox, I don't know yet who's focusing on that. These things go with funding, and probably when an opportunity to have grants to do that work, we might start. But maybe, I don't know, maybe CSR or elsewhere, I don't know, but I've not had anyone doing work on monkeypox yet. But it's great to hear from you, Prof. Doc. Thank you.
Prof. Motibe, I'm not sure if you wanted to say something.
Not in the line of what was raised right now, but I saw some interesting question in the chat. If you'd allow me, this person, Andre Nicholas, was asking about whether, and it's a general question that to all the speakers, that the opinion on integration of traditional medicine into psychiatric or psychological care. And in my opinion, it's a necessity. It's a great necessity because a lot of, in terms of diagnosis of these conditions in allopathic medicine, people who, we have seen people who have, say, the calling to be a healer being misdiagnosed with different types of mental health disorders. And so I believe that having a traditional healer as part of a healthcare team would kind of help around that. And this is expressed, or was even expressed in the study that we did, that, traditional healers see themselves as being very helpful in terms of being the ones who initiate treatment or initiate, alleviation of psychiatric or psychological conditions first, before patients go get started on these drugs, which then, because of their adverse effects, then tend to have those kind of effects where it's like the patient's character has changed. And pharmacologically, we know that there's a lot of adverse effects that the medicines that are used for psychology, for mental health illnesses cause. And so that would be my opinion, in that, it would be a great thing to have a traditional healer forming part of that kind of a team, a psychiatric or a psychological healthcare team, because they would help in that regard, to help with the misdiagnosis that would occur. However, we still need the services of the psychiatrist as well as psychotherapists to help. That would be my input on that question. I don't know. I just thought that would be important. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Thank you very much, Prof. Due to time, I was actually tasked to end at 11:40, and I'm looking at the time now. I think at this point, it's been a very engaging discussion, and we still have a number of questions that have not been addressed. Then I would like to request the organizers to make sure that the participants that had drop those questions, they do get the response from our panelists. Thank you so very much. But before we come to an end, I would like to request from our three speakers a 1 minute wrap up, something maybe you might have forgotten, or maybe it came up during the discussion, and or maybe you might have forgotten it during your presentation, something that perhaps you have more of a 1 minute wrap up type of a message. Can we start with Prof. Galeni?
Just one matter for me that Professor Guma has just raised on the chat around how do you apportion intellectual property to an individual healer when these things are community-based. Unfortunately, we are not lawyers, we are scientists. We don't know how to apportion that because we take the person who comes to us at face value. We don't have time to be researching that. But I think the Department of Science and Innovation, through the NICSO, National Indigenous Knowledge Systems Office, are kind of putting systems to address that. But I'm not a legal practitioner. I don't know. I won't be able to answer that at all. But I thought it's good to put it here on the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. And Mr. Ndima?
Program Director, I don't have much to add other than to thank the SAASTA and the rest of the panelists for the opportunity. Thank you, Program Director.
Thank you, Mr. Ndima. And Prof. Motive?
I also don't really have anything more to add, except that thanks for providing this platform for us to keep sharing and to keep the conversations going. It also helps in sort of people making the necessary connections. There are a lot of people who are expressing interest in traditional matters, traditional medicine issues, particularly research kind. And I'm happy that we will keep these conversations going. And as I said, all of our research has to translate to positive outcomes in terms of public health. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to our three speakers for such an enriching presentation and discussion, and also the audience. It was a very engaging audience. Thank you so very much. At this point, my assignment ends here. Now I'll have to hand over to NRF-SAASTA and to do the closing remarks and the vote of thanks. And to do that is Mr. Michael Ellis. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much for that. What an incredible session. Dr. Tozama Babani, thank you so much for your very good facilitation of this session. It's been incredibly enlightening. You know, at NRF-SAASTA, we are passionate about establishing these critical and impactful conversations about science and technology. I mean, as a broader organization, the NRF has this vision of research for a better society. And without conversations like we've had today, I believe that realizing that vision of research for a better society is not possible. You know, providing, creating these spaces where people can get together and have critical conversations. You know, I was so encouraged by, you know, almost 30 questions coming up in the chat box from participants today, and really this dialogue that has ensued through the day, I think has really been so meaningful. So thank you very much for that. You know, we've also, as the NRF, fairly recently adopted what we've termed our engaged research framework, which really seeks to ensure that research in South Africa is conducted for community, but also with community. It's about ensuring and looking at how knowledge is embedded within the fabric of our society. And I think that's become so clear through this conversation, that how knowledge is really embedded in South African society and African society. I think, you know, we've gone one step further. We laid out objectives this morning of ensuring that we profile the field of traditional medicine, and that we present key findings and viewpoints, which our speakers, I think, have so eloquently done today. But I think we've gone one step further in also dispelling a lot of myths about this area. And I think it was Prof. Moalani who said, you know, traditional medicine is modern medicine. And I thought that was a wonderful way of putting it and almost dispelling a myth in just that one statement. So really, it's an honor and a privilege for me just to thank, firstly, our facilitator, Dr. Tozama Mwabani. Really, thank you so much for enabling this conversation to take place in such an open and free and seamless manner. You've really done that so incredibly well today. To our speakers, Prof. Mutiba, Prof. Moalani, and Mr. Ndima. Without you, without bringing these different aspects of traditional and modern medicine together and your incredible insight and knowledge of this area, a conversation like this wouldn't be possible. So thank you so much for making the time and setting aside the time to be with us today and just share these insights with the broader community. And then, of course, very importantly, and I'd almost say most importantly, our attendees who've been quite substantive in this conversation today and very vocal and engaging. You know, I think we need to be not only taking in knowledge, but really having a conversation about knowledge. And I think that's definitely taken place from the active participation of all the attendees today. So thank you very much to each and every one of you for attending and for your contributions to the session. It's been wonderful to hear from the attendees in the session. I'd also just like to finish off by thanking our internal organizing team, specifically Mr. Koza and Ms. Munya Budi. You guys have done an incredible job in setting all of this up and getting it advertised and out there and ensuring that it runs as a seamless program today. So with that, as NRF-SAASTA, we'd really just like to thank you all for your attendance, and really please do participate in our future conversations, these critical conversations about science and technology. We appreciate each and every one of your participation in the session. Thank you very much to all of you. Dr. Mwabani, shall I hand over back to you, or shall we close the session with that?
Thank you so very much. I think that then this means that we've come to an end. Thank you, colleagues. Beautiful day.